You're a startup founder. You think your product is amazing and feel like more people should be buying, but the road is long and slow. It feels like you're stuck. There's always one thing I ask startup founders. Have you talked to your customers? They almost always say, heck yes, we talk to our customers all the time. But what I find is they're either selling or trying to improve their product. These are not customer-focused conversations. If we can get curious about our customers, then we can uncover critical insights that will help us build to the next round. I'm Anna Firmenov, and welcome to Building with Buyers, a show about startup growth where I'll explore how customers help startups build to the next round. Hi, Taylor. Taylor Jennings is lead UX researcher at Chili Piper, and I am such a huge fan of Chili Piper and Alina V as the founder of Chili Piper. I don't know what it is. Like, she not only is a great leader and founder and writer and mom and just like such a fun spirit. So I'm excited to have you here, Taylor.
I'm excited to be here. I agree with that completely. I think Alina is very brave for building in public and being vulnerable and honest, and really inspires a lot of people with that. So it's fun to hear that.
Chili Piper, for those that have not heard of Chili Piper, is your all-in-one demand conversion platform. It's the only solution that consolidates chat, routing, and scheduling all in one platform. Who's your target buyer, would you say?
Yeah, our target buyer is certainly anybody in the demand gen space or the operations space. So marketing ops, rev ops, sales ops type of folks. Anybody who has a problem with distributing leads or objects or getting meetings scheduled in a way that's as efficient as possible.
Okay. And you guys is it Series C funding? I think you've raised $54.4 million, but is that at Series C?
Our last one was a Series B, and maybe you'd have to fact check this. I believe early 2021.
Oh, okay. I think I saw Series C in Crunchbase. So who knows?
That also could be accurate.
Might be. Okay. Between Series B and Series C. So I am a huge fan of Chili Piper, and also I am an advisor at Nevadic, and Nevadic and Chili Piper have partnered on some really awesome content. For example, the 2024 Buyer First Best Practices Report. Coming back to this conversation, I would love to talk to you about, building with buyers, right? I'm exploring the role that customers play in helping startups build to the next round. That's what the focus is for this show. One big part of incorporating customers as part of, building to the next round is doing customer research. And so I wanted to ask you, how do you incorporate customer research at Chili Piper? Maybe we'll start with, I don't know, tell me about your goals first, and then tell me about that research that you do.
Yeah, sure. It seems like a simple question on the surface, but it's a pretty loaded one. Just for some context, generally my philosophy and goal as a researcher, and specifically obviously at Chili Piper right now, is to be of service and provide answers to tough questions for the people around me. So designers, engineers, marketers. It's my responsibility to make sure they have what they need to do their job. So that's kind of my overarching goal as a human, I guess, in research. At Chili Piper, our goals are often de-risking and validating things that we don't have answers to. So we try to inject research wherever we can, but we're a pretty small and mighty team of just me. And as an organization, we move very quickly. So in supporting everybody, we do have to make those kind of tough calls with limited resources and be selective about the projects we work on and where we can have the most impact. So as a company, sometimes that's testing a new feature or product. Sometimes it's validating a new design for a feature. Other times it's bigger goals like exploratory research for our platform or persona research, pricing research. Kind of covers the gamut.
You're like the lead researcher at Chili Piper. It says UX researcher, which to me seems more like, user experience is more around like the experience within the product. But from what you just told me, it seems like you do more than that. You're in charge of more than just that research.
Yeah, it's been a bit of an evolution, I would say. When I first started, and I think it kind of comes along with the maturity of our organization, as we were more focused on tactical UX type research, very product level, feature level, and it's evolved as we've evolved. And so now, yeah, I do fit into this really fun space where it's kind of like I think of myself as the question answerer, regardless of what kind of question it is or where it's coming from.
Awesome. Okay, so tell me more about like a couple ways that you incorporate customer research. Maybe tell me like what do you think about when you do product research? What are your goals with that research and what do you look for?
Yeah, it can depend on the project or product at hand, but I think in general, what we're looking for is a space where there's a lot of unknowns or a lot of questions that need to be answered. And sometimes there's maybe we think we have the answers and they're more like hypotheses that we want to test. And so anytime there's kind of that situation where we're spinning or we're circling or somebody isn't sure how to move forward, that's where I try to jump in and say, let's go validate this with some people who are outside of this room and can help us move past and move forward. And so the goal there is very different depending on the project, but I think starting with a clear goal is important. And for example, like in product research, I have a couple different examples maybe I can think of what that might look like, if that's helpful.
That is helpful. Can you tell me and give me an example of, but I also want to kind of backtrack on that. So, whenever you guys have questions, you don't just fill that in with assumptions. You need to research that, right? In order to feel more confident about the answer. And so, this applies, of course, to the work that I do as well, customer research and insights that we can get from customers to help inform our positioning, messaging, go to market strategy. But it also goes beyond that. Like wherever you are not quite sure which direction to go, and there's so much uncertainty for startups, right? I mean, there is. And so, wouldn't you want to fill those gaps with more confidence using some research?
Certainly.
So, I don't know if you have anything to say to that, but
I mean, it can almost be paralyzing sometimes with how many unknowns you have. And I think to some extent, there's unfortunately always going to be some unknowns in the startup world. We're working really quickly. We're often coming up against funding or, competitors are coming at us. And so I think it's really about identifying what those highest impact unknowns are and focusing your time and effort there, because in anything, we're never going to know it all. And so what we really need to do is make sure we're taking that time that's precious and using those resources to answer those bigger questions or really pushing where we need to.
yeah. So give me some examples of what were some really important questions that you needed to answer for your product?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest one that comes to mind is our pricing project. I'm happy to kind of go into that if you want, or maybe speak a bit more about a product level one.
I want to hear about both. Tell me more of like a product level one, and then let's talk about pricing.
Yeah. So a fairly big one for us from a product level relatively recently was I want to say it was like 2023, but honestly, the years all blur together at this point. I've been at Chili for a while. We were launching a new product and we thought we had this revolutionary new UX. We hadn't really seen the pattern before. And we did a bit of testing with a small group and ultimately decided to move forward with the approach because it tested well. And we kind of internally called it like a tree structure. And the best way to describe it is think of it as more like an outline that you're indenting. So like each step, for example, was like a headline and then sub steps and sub actions underneath. And so we had this kind of left right pattern and we just thought it was the best and we're really excited to bring it to market. Turns out after it goes to market and it's in market for a couple of months, we're hearing chatter not only from customers, but also from sales reps. Like people are having a hard time understanding this. It doesn't really align with, if they're moving from a similar product, it doesn't align with what that other one looks like. So there's a huge barrier to entry, not only learning the product, but a new UI. And so we thought, okay, well, that's interesting. Let's go back and let's see what we can do about this. And after working with our product and designers or product managers and designers to really understand, like, do people just not like it? Is it new? What is the real question we're trying to solve here? Because, sometimes people just don't like the way things look. And unfortunately, you're going to come up against that. But in this case, we had a real usability problem. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board and came back with some additional competitor research and decided to go in more of like a flow builder type view. So think of like a Salesforce flow, a HubSpot flow, something like that, which is kind of what all the competitors in the space were doing and similar products. And again, it tested really well. And we did a wider amount of user testing on that than we did the first round. And we've since moved all of our products to that flow builder UI, and it's performing really well. I think generally now that we've kind of moved everybody or every product over to that. We've seen a lot of, there's still some learning curve to it, but it's the accessibility of learning Chili Piper is a little bit shorter now because it's such a visual product and it's aligned with what people were expecting. And so it wasn't easy to hear this great revolutionary thing that we thought was going to change UX, or at least for us, was not the best move. But in really understanding again where those feedback was coming from and getting to the meat of it, we, I think, made a great decision for the company.
Yeah. I mean, that just kind of goes back to my earlier point of without research, you make assumptions thinking one thing, right? The founder, the leadership team, we're making assumptions. We're thinking this is going to be the best. This is going to be awesome. This feature they're going to love. And then you find out that they actually hate it. But then you have to dig deeper and make sure that it's not because it's new, right? And then you check the competition and how is their experience. And so that's research. That's like not coming at it with assumptions and guessing from a product perspective. So tell me about that pricing research. I want to hear more because pricing research, that's not something I hear a lot about at a startup, and also not coming from like a UX researcher. So how did you guys tell me a little bit of background on like why you decided to do this research?
Sure. Yeah. So we had a really large product launch coming last year, June of 2024. And ahead of that, leadership had thought, we haven't looked at our pricing in a while and we're bringing these additional products to market. We should really do some research here to make sure we price the new ones appropriately, but then make sure we're pricing the current products and the newer versions of them at an optimal price point for the market.
What were you priced at?
We were priced at we've made several changes, but before it was $30 for one of our products and you could bundle the other with it, but you weren't allowed to bundle multiple products. So for one reason or another, we had decided these two can be bundled and the rest are kind of a la carte. So that was another hypothesis we had of like, can we increase ACV? Can we increase sales if we have a scalable bundling strategy that doesn't restrict people to just these two products? Yeah. And so we had gotten a quote from a pricing firm to come in and see how long it would take and how much it would cost. And it was something that we weren't ready for, which was like upwards of $500,000 plus. And it was going to take like, I think 18 weeks on the low end and
holy cow.
Yeah, it was a lot. So we all decided that just wasn't going to work for us. And in the startup way, we were like, we're scrappy, we can do this. And if we can't do it, we'll bring in experts who can help us. And so I was very fortunate to be pulled in at that point and be trusted to kind of lead this exercise with very little pricing research. I had done a small scale pricing project at Chili Piper before and hadn't touched it since my marketing classes in college. So it was a leap of faith, I think, from the leadership to put me in charge of this. And I had a really good counterpart on our product marketing side, Madeline, to help kind of brainstorm through all of that.
How did you start? What did you do first?
How did we start? It's a great question. Started by documenting everything that we knew and all of the questions that we had. So I'm very document heavy as a person, and we're a fully remote company, and it's really difficult to get on the same page if things aren't on a piece of paper. And so we started by, what do we already know about our pricing in the past and changes we've made? What are we trying to learn? What goals do we have? And I think most importantly for us, what constraints are we operating within? Because we had some constraints from leadership as far as like our pricing needs to do these things or it needs to be structured in such a way. And so really understanding the limitations and then exactly what we were trying to go after at the start, and had to iterate on it a few times. But it was really helpful as we went up throughout the research to always be able to go back and look at what we had decided at the beginning, because scope creep and people try to start squeezing a million things in there. But that's really, to have that firm understanding at the start.
And so with the goal of figuring out what's your optimal pricing model, how did you then tackle the actual research? Like, how did you structure it? Did you use a survey? Did you do one-on-ones? Like, who were you talking to? What was it? How did you build that?
We decided a survey was going to be the best and ultimately ended up breaking it into two. And maybe this is a little kind of in the weeds here, but
never. It's never too in the weeds.
Perfect. Well, then I'll pull the weeds right out. But we were targeting closed lost folks that we didn't close business with, churned customers, happy customers, and also people who've never purchased us or heard of us before, who were in the marketing space, operations space, and of a certain size. And then we built a survey. We built two of them. The first one was focused on, again, the optimal price point per product. So Van Westendorp methodology, trying to understand at what price range do people consider this acceptable, and what's that ideal price point within that range for the market? And we went from there. We pre-qualified most of our participants to make sure we had data integrity, and everybody who got into the survey was actually within our ICP and understood the space we were in, even if they had never heard of Chili Piper before. But it was quite a meaty survey, so we gave people some money for taking it. We gave everybody $100 for their time, and that helped us a ton. I believe that first survey, we got like 180 or so responses as far as, again, per product pricing and some feature level questions per product, and took that to build out the second survey, which was more focused on bundles. And if we put this one with that one and it featured these things, what would you pay for it? And going from there.
Awesome. So it's not like it's cheap, but it's not the, $500,000 with that pricing research company. So awesome. And so I'm looking at your pricing page now, and it looks like all of it is like $30 per user per month. So what did you find from the research that you did on pricing?
Yeah. So we found that the optimal price point for most of our products, with the exception of one, was in that about $30. And so we figured, okay, if one of them's optimal price is 27, one's 32, if we make it an even 30 across the board, that's going to be easier to communicate. One of the constraints we had was, at that point in time, we wanted to maintain pricing by product. There was no opportunity to do kind of like a good, better, best sort of platform tiered model. And we needed to maintain a platform fee per product. So you'll probably notice on there too, each one has a platform fee. But in that second survey, what we understood was, when we start bundling these products together, how much are people willing to pay for them? And so the great thing about this product is there's scaled incentive, or the pricing is there's scaled incentives. So if you purchase Concierge for $30 and then you decide you also want to add on Handoff, we're doing something we weren't doing before, which is taking a little bit of the price off of that purchase to incentivize you to grow and to build with us. So all in, you can buy every product in the suite for $72 now, versus pre this, it would have been $120 with no incentive to purchase additional.
That's great. Are you seeing anything from how's the ACV been impacted? Like, what are you guys seeing, or is it still too early to say?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I saw in our all hands today a really interesting chart of our SDR sourced opportunities and how the ACV it was a 2024 recap. And there's a noticeable increase in the ACV of the SDR sourced deals from June through December, which is when we started with that pricing. It was early of June 2024. And I believe it was Q3 was kind of the first one we were able to look at. And our ACV had increased by 25% at that point.
That is not insignificant. That's awesome. So here is like a great example of doing the research in kind of a scrappy way, right? You're doing it yourself in-house with a survey and then another survey, paying these folks, finding the best pricing model to use, and getting some insights, getting some learnings, and then actually implementing it and then seeing the result. I love it. I love how that all came together for you. What would you say are your challenges with research and maybe customer research specifically?
Yeah. And I will just add to that, pricing research, it's a journey. Again, as you said, we did it in-house, so we learned a lot along the way, and we're in a different place than we were last year. So we are kind of reassessing our pricing structure right now. And I think it's important to be able to say, like, we did a thing, we tested it. Maybe we want to try something new, and that's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're here to learn and grow. But I think as far as like generally doing product research, the biggest challenge for me in our space is recruiting, and it's always been recruiting. There's a ton of firms out there who say they can find you the best people at a reasonable price. And then in my experience, at least for us, it doesn't go so well. So I do spend a lot of my time upfront making sure I'm sourcing the right folks, in sometimes pretty scrappy ways, but it makes me feel more confident in the decisions and outcomes we have, because I know that people we're talking to are the right people, even if it takes a bit longer. So that's kind of the persistent thorn in my side.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the front end of the process. We need people to do this research, but it's hard to get at them.
Mm-hmm.
Any challenges related to, once you get the data back from research, figuring out what's the insight here? What's the next step here? Like, or is that just tailor for you, piece of cake, you're experienced enough to know?
I mean, I want to say the second, of course. And I think it's something that gets better with time. But you are always grappling with that, so what? And so I had a manager really early on in my career who always was asking, so what? So what? Like, you're telling me that thing, what am I going to do with it? What's the action here? And so I've kind of trained my brain to think that way. And so I'm able to kind of extract the insights fairly quickly, as long as, again, we had a clear start or understanding at the start of what we were looking for. But I think it's to make it make sense and make other people care about it, it needs to be actionable. It needs to have okay, you learned this, what do I do with it? And so that, again, so what is kind of the question I often ask myself and would encourage others to ask if they're trying to present something like that.
I think goals also help. Like, if we know the goal of doing this research, we're going to do this product research with the goal of improving the user experience. We're going to do this pricing research with the goal of making it, more optimally priced so that more people are more likely to purchase, and then our average customer value becomes higher by whatever amount. And having a goal that you're doing the research, not just doing the research just to, we need to understand our customers. Like, let's do research, right? Having a goal is really helpful and helps you answer the so what? So what are we going to do with this information, right?
Yeah, the more specific, the better.
Totally.
Yeah. And sometimes there isn't a goal, it's just a research question, but that's your built-in so what. If you can answer that question at the end and tie it back to something you've learned, then I would say you've done the research well. And if you can't tie it back, that's okay. Try again, change something and iterate on it.
Awesome. This has been great. Taylor, I actually really enjoyed diving into, I know the pricing research was like a big undertaking for you and something that took time, took energy, took effort, right? So I was excited to hear more about how you thought about that, what you guys actually did with that, and what the result from that was. So thank you for sharing that with me. If anybody wants to reach out to Taylor, you can do so on LinkedIn. Taylor Jennings 1. Apparently there's another Taylor Jennings, so I'll include that link. And then Chili Piper, if you want to check out Chili Piper, go to chilipiper.com. And I thank you again, Taylor, for your time. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Anna. This was great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Building with Buyers. New episodes drop weekly, so make sure you're following wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on LinkedIn, Anna Furmanov. Visit my website to learn more about how to turn customer insights into positioning and messaging your buyers will understand. FurmanovMarketing.com. And don't forget to leave a review if you're loving the show.